Okay, so my refutation topic for today is the deep web, and the advocate's main claim was that the availability of the deep web promotes criminal activity, and he supported this by 3 secondary claims. The first being that the deep web has enabled a plethora of illegal activity. The second, that the deep web is easily accessible for the general public to download or install. And third, that there is minimal government control on these deep websites. My response to his claim is that his claim of fact is diminished because he didn't use hardly any evidence to support his points, and the examples and definitions he used were outdated and contained some errors. His first claim was that the deep web has enabled illegal activity on the internet. The deep web actually isn't the part of the internet where the illegal activity occurs. The advocate used the wrong term for this claim. According to Bright Planet, the deep web intelligence site, the dark web is a small portion even deeper inside of the deep web that is intentionally hidden and inaccessible through normal browsers. This is where the illegal activity occurs, not the deep web. So you have the surface of the internet, which is like main addresses and all that stuff, and then you have the deep web, and then underneath that you have the dark web, which is where the illegal activity like Tor and Hitman for Hire and child pornography sites are. The actual definition of the deep web, according to Michael Bergman from the Journal of Electronic Publishing, is anything that a search engine can't simply find for you. So if you're looking for a site on Google that you can't find and it won't show you on just the main pages, you need to go into the deep web to find those links. So the whole of the deep web can actually be helpful because it can provide you with information from medical papers or engineering databases or financial information or like independent newspaper articles that aren't as popular. An example that he used of illegal activities was the Silk Road, which sold drugs and guns. And Nathan Chandler, a consumer tech researcher, showed that the Silk Road was actually shut down in 2013 by the FBI. And it also shut down subsequent sites like the Silk Road 2.0 as well. So this is an outdated example and it's not applicable to what he's trying to say. And he also gave no evidence or citation on his examples like Hitman for Hire or the Silk Road. So we have no way to know where this information came from, and we're just expected to accept the truth of it. His second claim was that the deep web is easily accessible for the general public to download or install. And he just gave ways that you can install it. So there was no data or evidence to support how much activity is actually going on in the deep web, or how many sites there are, how many people are accessing it, and how much of the usage is actually illegal. And just because it's easy to access the site doesn't necessarily mean that all of the people are using it for these illegal activities. You could be using it just to find general information. And his third claim was that there is minimal government control on these deep websites. As I said before, the FBI shut down 2 versions of the Silk Road, which sold drugs and guns. So there is obviously some government monitoring that is going on these dark websites. And he also gave no legal or technical evidence to show what the government can and cannot do when it comes to the internet and the deep web. And he once again gave no background on this idea, and we're just expected to accept what he said without any evidence. So in conclusion, the advocates claim that the availability of the deep web promotes criminal activity is diminished because he hardly used any evidence to support his claims, and the examples used were outdated or contained errors. Thank you.
All right, all the structural stuff is fine. I think on the first point on the deep web where you define it, you've got the surface, you've got the deep, and then you've got the dark web, that the advocate basically has failed to note that most of the problems that they're talking about are at a different level than the one that is actually being discussed. I think that that's an interesting point. The definition that you have that talks about it being a search engine, or it's the deep web or the dark web is stuff that is not available in search engines. One of the first questions that pops into my head is, how do people who are on or operating in the deep web or the dark web locate the things that they want. It sounds to me like they have to know where they are in the first place to be able to access them. They have to be getting that information from someplace else, and that's got to be someplace other than the deep web. It's probably like I said, personal contacts or emails or something along those lines, and that all, of course, exists. That's not a problem with the deep web. That's just a problem of bad people out there. I'm not exactly sure that demonstrates that there's any danger here. And I thought you had a good response on this particular point. The demonstration that the Silk Road example is out of date, that there has been action on it, for instance, I think that's pretty effective. And one of the things that makes sense, by the way, is on that third point when they say there's a lack of control. Well, how can there be a lack of control if the government has successfully shut down the Silk Road in 2 different variations? I thought that was a good argument on that particular point. Also, I seem to remember in the advocate's original argument that sometimes the government kind of allows those things to go on for the purpose of being able to monitor and follow things, especially like terrorist activity. And that sounds to me like there's also government involvement here, but they're making a strategic choice as to how to enforce it. And I think you're missing an opportunity to make that argument applicable on the third point. Like I said, on the second point, that it's easily accessible, you basically challenged the lack of evidence that the advocate has on most of the points. I thought that was a very reasonable point to be making. And of course, if it's not accessible and it's deep, I can understand why there wouldn't be any evidence on how many people are using it or what kinds of activities they're engaged in there, because it's deep and it's hard to find, and so there's probably not any evidence on that. But one of the questions then is, what's the advocate's demonstration that there is a harm that's going on here? And I think that's the argument that you've been making throughout, that there's a lack of that kind of proof. All right, thank you. Zach Mann.